The woman in the dusty blue dress stumbled off the train in Tucumcari, New Mexico, her face streaked with tears that left trails through the grime of 3 days' travel, and Xavier Kane knew immediately that something had gone terribly wrong with the arrangement. He stood on the platform with his hat in his hands, the August sun beating down on his dark hair as he watched her collapse onto a wooden bench, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside her. Xavier had been corresponding with Catherine Foster for 6 months, their letters crossing the miles between New Mexico and Boston with increasing warmth and hope. She had written about her circumstances, a proper lady fallen on hard times after her father's shipping business collapsed, leaving her and her younger sister destitute. He had been honest about his life as a cattle rancher on the edge of civilization, the loneliness that came with it, and his desire for a partner who could weather the harsh beauty of the territory. But nothing in those carefully penned letters had prepared him for the sight of her anguish now. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. She was younger than he expected, perhaps 22 to his 28, with honey-colored hair coming loose from its pins and green eyes that looked up at him with such devastation that his chest tightened. Her dress, though travel-worn, showed quality in its making, and her hands, though trembling, were delicate and graceful. "Miss Foster," he said quietly, his voice rough from disuse. He spent most of his days talking to cattle and his horse. She looked up at him with those red-rimmed eyes, and fresh tears spilled over. "She did not come," Catherine whispered, her voice breaking. "My sister. She promised she would be on the train behind me, that she would follow in 2 weeks once I was settled, but I received a telegram at the last stop. She married. She married a banker twice her age because she was afraid, and now I am alone, truly alone, and I should not have come. I should not have imposed myself upon you when everything is so broken." Xavier had 3 sisters back in Texas, all married now and scattered across the state. He knew something about family bonds and the pain of separation. He knelt down in front of Catherine, aware of the curious stares from other passengers moving past them, and he did something his mother had taught him was worth more than words. He pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and gently wiped her tears. "Your tears end here with me," he said softly, meeting her gaze with steady brown eyes that held no judgment, only kindness. "Whatever brought you to this moment, whatever you have lost, it does not change what I offered in my letters. A home, a partner, a chance to build something good in this wild place. You are not alone, Catherine, not anymore." She stared at him, her breath catching in her throat. "You do not know me. I could be anyone. I could be running from scandal or debt or worse." "Are you?" he asked simply. "No," she said, and something in her voice told him it was true. "I am only running from loneliness and poverty and a city that held nothing for me but memories of better days." "Then we already have something in common," Xavier said, rising and extending his hand to her. "This territory is full of people running from something, but it is also a place where you can run towards something better. Come, let me show you." She took his hand, her fingers small and cold in his work-roughened palm, and stood on unsteady legs. He retrieved her 2 battered trunks from the platform, hefting them easily onto his broad shoulders, and led her to where his wagon waited in the dusty street. The town of Tucumcari was small but growing, with false-fronted buildings lining the main road and the constant sound of hammering as new construction pushed westward. The railroad had brought new life to the territory, and with it came opportunity for those brave enough to seize it. Xavier helped Catherine onto the wagon seat, noting how she sat rigid and proper despite her distress, her hands folded tightly in her lap. He climbed up beside her and took the reins, clucking softly to the 2 horses that waited patiently in their traces. "The ranch is about an hour north," he said as they rolled out of town. "Nothing fancy, but the house is solid. Built it myself 3 years ago when I bought the land. I run about 200 head of cattle, and I have 2 men who work for me, good men. Mateo and his son Diego. They have a cabin on the far side of the property." Catherine nodded, still not looking at him. The landscape stretched out around them, vast and empty under the brilliant blue sky. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and hazy with heat, and the scrubland was dotted with sagebrush and the occasional twisted juniper. It was beautiful in its starkness, but Xavier could see how it might seem harsh to someone raised in the green gentility of the East. "I know it is not Boston," he said quietly. "Boston was dying slowly," Catherine replied, her voice steadier now. "My father built ships, beautiful clipper ships that raced across the oceans. But steam is taking over and he refused to adapt. He died 3 years ago, broken and bankrupt. My mother had passed when I was 12. It was just my sister and me, living on the charity of distant cousins who made it clear we were burdens. When your advertisement appeared in the newspaper, it seemed like Providence. And your sister," Rebecca was 16, too young to leave. "I thought once I was established, once I had a home to offer her, she would come, but she grew frightened. The banker offered security, a house in the city, servants. She chose safety over the unknown." Catherine's voice held no bitterness, only sadness. "I cannot fault her for being afraid. I am terrified." Xavier glanced at her, saw the way her jaw was set with determination despite the fear in her eyes, and felt something shift in his chest. She had courage, this woman who had traveled across a continent to marry a stranger. "It is all right to be afraid," he said. "I was scared half to death the day I left Texas and came here. My father wanted me to work his ranch, follow in his footsteps, marry the daughter of his business partner. But I wanted something that was mine, built by my own hands, so I took my savings and I ran. Best decision I ever made, even though there were nights I thought the loneliness might kill me." "Is that why you sent for a bride?" Catherine asked, finally turning to look at him. In the bright sunlight, he could see that her eyes were an unusual shade of green, like new grass after rain. "Partly," he admitted, "but also because I wanted what my parents had. They loved each other fierce and true until the day my mother died. I saw what that kind of partnership could be, and I wanted it for myself. Not just someone to cook and clean, but someone to build dreams with." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the steady clip of hooves on the packed earth road. The sun began its slow descent toward the mountains, and the air cooled fractionally. Xavier pointed out landmarks as they went. A rocky outcropping where he had found ancient arrowheads, a seasonal creek that ran wild in spring, the boundary markers of his land. When the ranch house came into view, Xavier felt the familiar swell of pride in his chest. It was not large, but it was well built with thick adobe walls and a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides. A barn stood nearby, along with several outbuildings and a corral where horses moved lazily in the evening air. Smoke rose from the chimney of a smaller cabin in the distance, where Mateo and Diego would be preparing their evening meal. Catherine sat up straighter, and Xavier tried to see it through her eyes. No manicured lawns or flower gardens, no neighbors close by, just raw land and endless sky. But there was something honest about it, something real that could not be found in the crowded streets of a city. "It is beautiful," she said, and he heard the surprise in her voice. "Harsh, but beautiful." "That is this place exactly," he said, pulling the wagon to a stop in front of the house. "Harsh and beautiful, it will test you, but it will never lie to you." He helped her down from the wagon, his hands spanning her waist, and felt her sway slightly. "When did you last eat?" he asked, concerned. "This morning, I think, or perhaps yesterday morning. The days have blurred together. Xavier guided her firmly toward the house. Then food first, before anything else. Come. The interior of the house was simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and furniture that Xavier had made himself or purchased from craftsmen in Santa Fe. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, and doorways led to a kitchen, a bedroom, and a small second room he used for storage. Catherine stood in the center of the room, her arms wrapped around herself as if holding herself together. "The bedroom is yours," Xavier said, moving to the kitchen and beginning to pull out supplies. "I will sleep out here. I want you to feel safe, Catherine. We will take our time with this arrangement, get to know each other properly. There is no rush." She blinked at him, clearly surprised. "But we are to be married. That was the agreement." "The agreement was that you would come here and we would see if we suited," he corrected gently. "I will not force you into anything. We will have a proper courtship, even if it is a bit backwards." He smiled, hoping to ease the tension in her shoulders. "Now sit. I am not much of a cook, but I can manage beans and cornbread without poisoning anyone." Catherine sat at the rough wooden table, watching as he moved competently around the kitchen, building up the fire in the cast iron stove and setting a pan to heat. He had lived alone long enough to develop basic skills, though he knew his cooking was plain at best. "Tell me about your cattle," she said after a moment, clearly trying to find solid ground in this strange new situation. "What breed do you raise?" "Longhorns mostly, mixed with some Hereford bulls I brought in last year." "The Longhorns are tough, can survive on less water and sparse grazing, but the Herefords produce better beef. I am trying to develop a herd that has the best qualities of both." He stirred beans in the pan, adding some dried peppers and salt. "It is slow work, but I am building something that will last." "And the market? Where do you sell?" "Trail drives to Kansas mostly, though the railroad is changing that. Soon we will be able to ship directly from here. It will change everything for ranchers in the territory." They talked as he cooked, the conversation becoming easier as it moved to practical matters. Catherine asked intelligent questions, and Xavier found himself impressed by how quickly she grasped the economics of cattle ranching. By the time he set a plate of food in front of her, some of the tension had left her face. She ate hungrily, and color began to return to her cheeks. Xavier sat across from her with his own plate, content to eat in comfortable silence. Through the window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed to set the mountains on fire. "I have never seen such a sunset," Catherine said softly, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. "In Boston, the buildings blocked the sky. I forgot how vast the world could be." "Wait until you see the stars," Xavier said. "No city lights to dim them here. On a clear night you can see the whole sweep of the Milky Way." After dinner, he heated water for her to wash, then showed her to the bedroom. It was sparse, with a bed he had built from pine, a dresser, and hooks on the wall for clothes. But the mattress was filled with fresh straw and the linens were clean, washed just 2 days before in anticipation of her arrival. "I will bring in your trunks," he said from the doorway. "There is water in the pitcher and the necessary is out back. If you need anything in the night, just call. I will hear you." "Xavier," she said, stopping him as he turned to go. "Thank you for your kindness. I do not know what I expected when I arrived, but you have exceeded it in every way." He nodded, feeling heat rise in his neck. "Get some rest, Catherine. Tomorrow things will look better." But tomorrow brought its own challenges. Xavier woke before dawn as always, his body trained to the rhythms of ranch work. He dressed quietly and slipped outside to begin the morning chores, feeding the horses and chickens, checking on the cattle in the near pastures. The sky was just beginning to lighten when Mateo rode up, his weathered face curious. "So the bride arrived?" Mateo asked in Spanish-accented English. He was in his 50s, a vaquero who had worked ranches from California to Texas before settling here. His son Diego, 19 and learning the trade, rode beside him. "She arrived," Xavier confirmed. "She has had a difficult journey. Be patient with her as she adjusts." Mateo nodded wisely. "My Maria was terrified when I brought her from Mexico. She cried for a week, but the land got into her blood and she grew to love it. Same will happen with your woman, you will see." Xavier hoped he was right. He set Mateo and Diego to work checking the northern fence line, where cattle had a habit of pushing through to reach a small spring. Then he returned to the house to start breakfast. Catherine emerged from the bedroom as the smell of coffee filled the house. She had changed into a simpler dress of brown calico and had managed to pin her hair back into some semblance of order, though curls still escaped around her face. She looked young and uncertain in the morning light, but also determined. "I can cook," she said immediately. "Please, let me be useful. I may not know much about ranching, but I am a fair hand in the kitchen." Xavier stepped aside, letting her take over. She moved through his kitchen with the efficiency of long practice, finding what she needed and improving on his plain breakfast with deft touches. Soon they were sitting down to eggs, bacon, and biscuits that were far superior to anything he had ever managed. "You said you were a fair hand," he said around a mouthful of fluffy biscuit. "You are better than fair." A small smile touched her lips, the first real one he had seen. "My mother believed that a lady should know how to run a household properly, even if we had servants. She taught me to cook, to sew, to manage accounts. She said you never knew when circumstances might change. She was a wise woman." "She was," Catherine agreed quietly. "I wish she could have seen that her lessons were not wasted." The days began to develop a rhythm. Xavier worked from dawn until dusk, managing the cattle and the endless tasks that came with running a ranch. Catherine took over the house, cleaning and organizing, cooking meals that made Xavier remember his mother's kitchen back in Texas. But he could see the restlessness in her, the way she stood on the porch staring out at the vast emptiness, as if trying to find her place in it. On the fourth day, he found her crying again, standing behind the house with her apron pressed to her face. His heart clenched and he approached slowly. "What is wrong?" he asked gently. "Nothing," she said, then laughed bitterly. "Everything, I do not know. I thought I would feel settled by now, but instead I feel like I am floating, untethered to anything. In Boston, even in poverty, I knew who I was. Here, I do not know what I am supposed to be." Xavier thought carefully before speaking. "You are supposed to be yourself. There is no role to play here, Catherine, no society to judge you. You can be whoever you want to be." "But I do not know who that is," she whispered. He made a decision then. "Come with me tomorrow, ride out with me to check the herds. You cannot know this place from the porch. You have to get out into it." She looked doubtful. "I have never ridden a horse." "Then it is time you learned." The next morning, Xavier saddled his gentlest mare, a dun-colored horse named Honey with a patient disposition. Catherine approached nervously, wearing a split skirt she had fashioned from one of her old dresses, cutting and resewing it late into the night. "Talk to her first," Xavier instructed. "Let her know you are a friend." Catherine reached out tentatively, stroking Honey's soft nose. The mare nickered gently, and Catherine smiled, surprised. Xavier showed her how to mount, how to hold the reins, how to sit in the saddle. She was awkward at first, tense and uncertain, but as they walked slowly away from the ranch buildings, he saw her begin to relax. They rode for hours that day, moving at an easy pace through the scrubland. Xavier pointed out plants, told her which ones the cattle preferred, which ones signaled underground water. He showed her the boundaries of his land and his dreams for expanding the herd. And Catherine, her initial fear fading, began to ask questions and engage with the landscape in a way she had not before. They stopped by a small creek for lunch, sitting in the shade of a cottonwood tree while the horses grazed nearby. Xavier had packed bread and cheese and apples, and they ate while watching a hawk circle overhead. "I can see why you love it," Catherine said finally. "The silence is not empty. It is full of things you miss in the city. The wind, the bird calls, the sound of water over stone." "You are beginning to understand," Xavier said, pleased. She turned to him, and something in her expression had shifted. The despair that had shadowed her face since her arrival had lifted, replaced by curiosity and the first stirrings of belonging. "Thank you for being patient with me. For not giving up when I arrived as such a mess." "You had cause to be upset," he said. "Grief and fear are not weaknesses, Catherine. They are honest responses to loss. You are a good man, Xavier Kane," she said softly. "I am trying to be," he replied, meeting her green eyes and feeling that shift in his chest again, that awareness of her as more than just an arrangement, more than just a solution to loneliness. As summer turned toward fall, Catherine became more confident in her riding and more knowledgeable about the ranch. She started a vegetable garden near the house, coaxing tomatoes and squash and peppers from the dry soil with careful watering. She befriended Mateo and Diego, learning Spanish phrases from them and cooking for them on occasion. She began to build a life, and Xavier fell in love with her. It was not sudden or dramatic. It was in the small moments, the way she laughed when a calf playfully butted her, the fierce concentration on her face as she kneaded bread dough, the quiet companionship of sitting together on the porch in the evenings watching the stars emerge. She was brave and capable and stronger than she knew, and she was becoming part of this place, part of his life in ways that felt as natural as breathing. But he held back, remembering his promise to give her time, to not rush her. They lived as friends, as partners in the running of the ranch, but not as husband and wife. Sometimes he caught her watching him with an expression he could not quite read, but she never said anything, and he did not want to presume. In late September, word came of a dance in town, a celebration of the harvest and the new railroad spur being completed. Xavier hesitated to mention it, unsure if Catherine would want to face the scrutiny of the townspeople. But she surprised him by asking about it at dinner. "Mateo mentioned there is a dance Saturday," she said casually. "Will you go?" "I was thinking about it," he admitted. "Do you want to?" "Yes," she said, then added quickly, "if you do not mind being seen with me. I know our situation is unusual." Xavier frowned. "I would be proud to be seen with you, Catherine. If anyone has something to say about our arrangement, they can say it to me directly." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Then I would like to go. I have not danced in years." Saturday arrived clear and warm, the last gasp of summer before fall truly set in. Catherine wore a dress she had brought from Boston, a green silk that matched her eyes and brought out the gold in her hair. Xavier wore his best shirt and vest, his boots polished to a shine. When she emerged from the bedroom, he felt his breath catch. "You are beautiful," he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Color rose in her cheeks. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." The ride into town felt different than that first journey 2 months before. Then she had been a stranger, broken and grieving. Now she sat beside him with confidence, pointing out changes in the landscape, chatting easily about plans for the garden next year. She belonged here now, Xavier thought. She belonged with him. The dance was held in the largest building in town, a warehouse temporarily cleared of goods and decorated with bunting and lanterns. Music spilled out into the street, fiddle and guitar, and the stomp of feet on wooden floors. Inside, it seemed half the territory had turned out: ranchers and railroad workers, shopkeepers and their families, even some of the cavalry from the nearby fort. Xavier kept Catherine close as they entered, aware of the curious stares. But she held her head high, and when several of the ranch wives approached to introduce themselves, she engaged with warmth and grace that quickly put them at ease. Xavier found himself claimed by other ranchers wanting to talk about cattle prices and weather predictions, but he kept one eye on Catherine, making sure she was all right. She was more than all right. She was laughing with a group of women near the refreshment table, her face animated and happy. When the music started, Xavier made his way to her and held out his hand. "May I have this dance?" he asked formally. "You may," she said, placing her hand in his. He led her onto the floor as the band struck up a waltz. She fit perfectly in his arms, her hand light on his shoulder, following his lead with easy grace. They had never been this close before, never touched with such intentional intimacy, and Xavier felt the awareness of her wash over him like a wave. "I did not know you could dance," Catherine said, looking up at him with sparkling eyes. "My sisters made sure I learned," he replied. "They said no brother of theirs would shame them by not knowing how to properly partner a lady. Remind me to thank them if I ever meet them." They danced several dances, and Xavier noticed with satisfaction that other men were eyeing Catherine with interest and perhaps a touch of envy. She was his, or at least she could be if he found the courage to tell her what he felt. Between dances, an older woman approached them, her face kind but curious. "You must be the bride from back east," she said to Catherine. "Sarah Mitchell. My husband owns the general store." "Catherine Foster," Catherine replied. "It is a pleasure to meet you. How are you finding our little town?" Sarah asked. "It is different from what I knew, but I am finding that I love it," Catherine said honestly. "The land has a beauty that grows on you. And your husband, is he treating you well?" Sarah glanced at Xavier with a knowing smile. Catherine hesitated, and Xavier spoke up quickly. "We are not yet married, Mrs. Mitchell. Catherine is still adjusting to life here. We are courting properly." Sarah's eyebrows rose, but she nodded approvingly. "That is good to hear. Too many mail-order arrangements rush into things. Taking your time is wise." She patted Catherine's hand. "If you need anything, dear, or just want some female company, you come by the store. We women have to look after each other out here." "Thank you," Catherine said warmly. "I will." As the evening wore on, Xavier found himself relaxing and enjoying the simple pleasure of being with Catherine in public, of seeing her happy and accepted by the community. When the band played the last waltz of the night, he held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, lavender and something uniquely her. "Thank you for bringing me," she said softly as the music ended. "I did not realize how much I needed this." "There will be more," he promised. "Dances and church socials and all manner of gatherings. You are part of this community now, Catherine." On the ride home, Catherine was quiet but not sad. She sat close to him on the wagon seat, closer than she needed to, and Xavier dared to put his arm along the back of the seat behind her shoulders. She leaned into him slightly, and his heart raced. "Xavier," she said as they turned onto the road leading to the ranch, "I need to tell you something." His stomach clenched. "What is it?" "I have been thinking about our arrangement, about what you said when I arrived, that we would take our time and see if we suited." She turned to look at him in the moonlight. "I think we suit. More than suit. I think we could be happy together, truly happy. But I do not know what you feel, if you still want to marry me, or if I have become just a housekeeper to you." Xavier pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her fully. "Catherine, you have never been just a housekeeper. From the moment you stepped off that train, Even in your tears, I saw someone brave and strong. These past months, getting to know you, watching you build a life here, I have fallen in love with you. Completely, irrevocably in love. I held back because I wanted you to be sure to choose this freely. But if you are asking what I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want children with you and grandchildren and a lifetime of watching sunsets together. Her breath caught, and in the moonlight he saw tears on her cheeks again. But these were different from the tears she had shed that first day. These were tears of joy. Your tears end here with me, he said, echoing his promise from that first meeting. No more sorrow, Catherine. Only happiness from now on. Yes, she whispered. Yes to everything. Yes to marriage and a life together and all the dreams you just spoke. I love you too, Xavier. I think I have been falling in love with you since that first moment when you knelt in front of me and offered kindness instead of judgment. Yes. He kissed her then, his first kiss in 5 years, and her first kiss ever from the taste of her innocence and surprise. But she kissed him back with a passion that matched his own, her hands coming up to cup his face, her body pressing close. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Will you marry me, Catherine Foster?" he asked properly. "I will, Xavier Kane," she replied, "as soon as we can arrange it." They married 2 weeks later in the small church in Tucumcari, with Mateo and Diego standing as witnesses and half the town in attendance. Catherine wore a new dress she had sewn herself from cream-colored fabric Xavier had bought in Santa Fe, and she carried wildflowers Diego had picked that morning. Xavier wore his best suit, brought from Texas years ago and smelling of cedar from the trunk where it had been stored. The circuit preacher performed the ceremony, his words about love and commitment and partnership falling on 2 people who already understood those concepts deeply. When Xavier slipped a simple gold band onto Catherine's finger, a band he had commissioned from a jeweler in Santa Fe and had inscribed with their initials and the date they met, she cried again. Happy tears this time, which she wiped away with shaking hands. "You may kiss your bride," the preacher said with a smile, and Xavier did thoroughly and properly to the cheers and whistles of the assembled crowd. The reception was held at the Mitchell's store, cleared of goods for the occasion. There was food and music and dancing, and Catherine glowed with happiness, never far from Xavier's side. Sarah Mitchell pulled her aside at one point, her eyes twinkling. "You have done well for yourself, my dear," she said. "Xavier Kane is one of the good ones." "I know," Catherine replied, watching her new husband laugh at something Mateo was saying. "I am the luckiest woman in the territory." That night, they returned to the ranch as husband and wife. Xavier carried Catherine over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition. The house looked different somehow, warmer and more complete with Catherine truly belonging there, in the bedroom that was now theirs. Xavier was gentle and patient, knowing she was nervous. They took their time learning each other, discovering what brought pleasure and joy. Catherine was shy but eager, and Xavier found himself overwhelmed by the gift of her trust, her body, her heart. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, Catherine traced patterns on his chest with her fingertips. "I did not know it could be like this," she said softly. "That marriage could be such a partnership of equals, that love could feel so safe and yet so thrilling." Xavier kissed her forehead. "We will build something good together, Catherine. I promise you that. We already have," she replied. The first year of their marriage was full of adjustments and discoveries. Catherine threw herself into ranching life with determination, learning to help with branding and doctoring cattle, keeping accounts and managing the household budget. She expanded her garden and started raising chickens, selling eggs in town for extra income. She became friends with the other ranch wives in the area, forming a quilting circle that met monthly and provided vital social connection in the isolated territory. Xavier found himself happier than he had ever been, coming home to Catherine each evening, sharing meals and conversation, and their bed filled spaces in his heart he had not realized were empty. She made him laugh with her dry observations about the cattle's personalities. She challenged him to think differently about ranch management, suggesting innovations that often proved successful. She became not just his wife but his true partner in every sense. When Catherine discovered she was pregnant in the spring of their first year together, they were both overjoyed and terrified. The nearest doctor was 2 days' ride away, and childbirth on the frontier carried risks that neither wanted to dwell on. But Sarah Mitchell had birthed 6 children and had helped deliver dozens more. She promised to come stay with them when Catherine's time came through the summer. As Catherine's belly grew, Xavier became almost comically protective. He tried to stop her from riding, from lifting anything heavy, from working in the garden in the heat of the day. Catherine tolerated his fussing with patient amusement, until finally she sat him down and spoke firmly. "I am not made of glass, Xavier. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I need to stay active and strong for the birth. So stop treating me like an invalid and treat me like your wife, your partner." He had laughed and kissed her and tried to worry less, though he never fully succeeded. In October, as the leaves on the cottonwoods turned gold, Catherine went into labor. Xavier sent Diego racing to town for Sarah while he stayed with his wife, holding her hand through the contractions, wiping her face with cool cloths, feeling more helpless than he had ever felt in his life. Sarah arrived 6 hours later, bustling and efficient, and shooed Xavier out of the bedroom. "This is women's work now," she said kindly but firmly. "You go wait with Mateo. We will call you when it is over." The next 12 hours were the longest of Xavier's life. He paced outside the house, sat on the porch with his head in his hands, prayed to a God he had half forgotten in the wilderness. Mateo and Diego kept him company, bringing him coffee and food he could not eat, distracting him with stories and predictions. Finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, turning the sky pink and gold, Xavier heard the thin wail of a newborn. He jumped to his feet, his heart pounding, and waited for someone to tell him it was all right to enter his own bedroom. Sarah appeared in the doorway, smiling broadly. "You have a son, Xavier, a strong, healthy boy, and Catherine came through beautifully, though she is exhausted. Come meet your child." Xavier entered the bedroom on shaking legs. Catherine lay propped on pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but radiant. And in her arms, wrapped in a blanket she had sewn herself, was the smallest person Xavier had ever seen. His son. "Come here," Catherine said softly. "Meet Emmett Kane." Xavier sat carefully on the edge of the bed, looking down at the tiny face, the closed eyes, the small fists waving in the air. Emmett. They had chosen the name together after Xavier's grandfather. He reached out one finger and his son's hand immediately wrapped around it with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Xavier whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You are perfect. Thank you, Catherine." "Thank you for this gift. We made him together," she replied, smiling. "He is half you, half me, all ours." Xavier leaned down and kissed her gently, then pressed his lips to his son's forehead. "I will protect you both," he vowed. "Always, you are my whole world." The years that followed were full and rich. Emmett grew into a sturdy boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair, fearless and curious about everything. When he was 2, Catherine became pregnant again, and this time Xavier was less panicked, though still concerned. Their daughter Clara was born in the spring, smaller and calmer than her brother, with Xavier's brown eyes and Catherine's honey-colored hair. The ranch prospered as well. Xavier expanded the herd, bought more land, built a larger barn. Catherine's vegetable garden became famous in the area, and she started selling produce in town along with her eggs and the butter she churned. They saved money and made plans, talking late into the night about the future they were building. When the territory became a state in 1912, they celebrated along with everyone else, knowing that they had been part of building this place from rough wilderness into something civilized and lasting. Their children were part of the first generation born into statehood, true New Mexicans with deep roots in the land. Emmett grew into a young man who loved ranching as much as his father, learning the work with dedication and skill. Clara was quieter but equally capable, with a gift for handling horses that bordered on magical. They both spoke English and Spanish fluently, having learned from Diego, and they understood that this land required respect and hard work to thrive. On a cool evening in September, 25 years after Catherine had stepped off that train crying, Xavier sat on the porch with his wife watching the sunset. Their children were grown now, Emmett 24 and recently married to a teacher from Santa Fe, Clara 22, and engaged to a surveyor from Albuquerque. The ranch that had been Xavier's dream was now a family legacy. 400 acres of prime grazing land and a reputation for quality cattle that reached to Kansas and beyond. Catherine's hair had threads of silver now, and Xavier's dark hair was going gray at the temples. But she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and the love between them had only deepened with time. "You ever think about that first day?" Xavier asked, reaching over to take her hand. "When you stepped off the train?" "Sometimes," Catherine admitted. "I was so lost then, so broken. I thought my life was ending. And now," she smiled, the lines around her eyes crinkling in the way he loved, "now I know it was just beginning. Everything I lost in Boston, my father's business, my childhood home, even my sister in a way, led me here. Led me to you, to this life we have built. I would not change a single moment, even the painful ones, because they brought me to where I belong." "Your tears ended that day," Xavier said, repeating the words he had spoken a quarter-century before. "With me." "They did," she agreed. "You kept that promise, Xavier. You have given me nothing but joy and love and a life richer than any I could have imagined." "You gave me the same," he said, raising her hand to his lips and kissing it. "You took a lonely cowboy and made him part of something beautiful, a family, a home. A love story for the ages." Catherine laughed softly. "Listen to you getting poetic in your old age." "I am not old," he protested. 53 is not old." "And I am 47, she said. "Not old, but certainly no longer young. Our children think we are ancient. They will understand when they have been married as long as we have. When they know what it is to build a life with someone over decades, through hardships and triumphs, children and grandchildren." "Speaking of grandchildren," Catherine said with a knowing smile, "Emmett told me this morning that Rebecca is expecting. We are going to be grandparents, Xavier." Xavier felt his heart swell with joy. "A grandchild, our legacy continuing. Did they say when?" "Spring, probably April. Rebecca wants me there when the baby comes." "Of course you will be there," Xavier said immediately. "We both will. This is a miracle, Catherine, our grandson or granddaughter." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching as the sun touched the mountains and the sky began its nightly transformation into shades of fire and gold. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly. Closer, a horse nickered in the corral, the sounds of the ranch, the sounds of home. "I love you," Catherine said softly, the words as meaningful now as they had been when first spoken. "Thank you for being the man who caught my tears that day and promised to end them." "I love you," Xavier replied. "Thank you for being brave enough to step off that train and give us both a chance. You are the best decision I ever made, Xavier Kane." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they watched the rest of the sunset together. Two people who had started as strangers brought together by advertisement and necessity, and who had built something remarkable and lasting from that unlikely beginning. A love that had weathered hardships and celebrated triumphs. A family that would carry their legacy into the future. A home in the harsh, beautiful wilderness of New Mexico. The years continued to roll forward as they always did. Xavier and Catherine became grandparents multiple times over. Emmett and his wife having 3 children, Clara and her husband having 2. The ranch house, which had once seemed large to Xavier when he built it, was expanded to accommodate family gatherings, with an added room for visiting grandchildren, and a larger kitchen where Catherine could teach her daughters-in-law her recipes. Christmas became a particular joy, with the house full of children's laughter and the smell of pine and cinnamon. Catherine made sure to keep the traditions she remembered from her own childhood, mixing them with the Mexican traditions that Mateo had shared with them over the years. The resulting celebration was unique and wonderful, a blend of cultures that reflected the reality of life in New Mexico. Mateo passed away peacefully in his sleep when he was 78, and Diego took over full partnership in running the ranch alongside Emmett. The older man's funeral brought together people from across the territory, testament to his kindness and skill. Catherine wept openly, having loved Mateo like the father she had lost, and Xavier spoke at the service about loyalty and friendship, and the bonds that transcended blood. Diego married a woman from town, a widow with 2 children of her own, and they built a new house on the property. The ranch became truly a family compound, with multiple generations living and working together. It was everything Xavier had dreamed of when he first came to New Mexico, and more than he had dared hope for when he placed that advertisement seeking a wife. As Xavier entered his 60s, he began to slow down, letting Emmett and Diego take on more of the day-to-day operations. He and Catherine spent more time together, taking rides out to their favorite spots, sitting on the porch in the evenings, traveling occasionally to Santa Fe, or even once to California, to see the Pacific Ocean that Catherine had heard about but never seen. Standing on the beach in San Francisco, watching the waves crash against the rocks, Catherine turned to Xavier with wonder in her still green eyes. "My father built ships to cross this ocean," she said. "He died thinking he was a failure, but if he had not failed, I would never have left Boston. I would never have found you. In a strange way, his failure gave me everything." Xavier wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close against the ocean wind. "Then I am grateful for his failure, though I am sorry for his pain. Everything that happened led to this to us." "I believe that was meant to be." "Meant to be," Catherine echoed, leaning into him. "I believe that too." They returned to New Mexico renewed, ready to enjoy their golden years in the place they had made home. Xavier taught his grandchildren to ride and rope, passing down skills his own father had taught him. Catherine taught her granddaughters to cook and sew and garden, but also to ride and keep accounts and think for themselves. Both of them were determined that the next generation would have the skills and knowledge to thrive in a changing world. The automobile came to Tucumcari, and then the telephone and electricity. The wild frontier that Xavier and Catherine had known was becoming civilized, connected to the larger world. Their grandchildren grew up with opportunities they had never imagined, education and technology and choices that seemed limitless. But through all the changes, The ranch remained a constant. The land that Xavier had claimed and built upon, that Catherine had learned to love, stayed in the family. Emmett proved to be as capable a rancher as his father, with innovations of his own that kept the operation profitable and growing. Clara's husband brought surveying and engineering knowledge that helped with water management and land development. The family business adapted and thrived. On the 50th anniversary of the day Catherine stepped off the train in Tucumcari, Xavier planned a surprise. He arranged for the whole family to gather at the ranch. All the children and grandchildren, Diego and his family, friends from town. He commissioned a photographer to come from Santa Fe with his equipment, and he prepared a speech. Catherine knew something was happening, but not the extent of it. When she walked out of the house that September morning to find dozens of people assembled, tears immediately sprang to her eyes. "What is all this?" she asked, looking at Xavier in confusion and delight. "This," he said, taking her hand, "is a celebration. 50 years ago today, you stepped off a train crying, and I promised you that your tears would end with me. Today, we celebrate half a century of that promise kept, of a love that has built all of this." He gestured to encompass the ranch, the family, the life they had created together. Emmett stepped forward, his own children clustered around him. "Ma, Pa, we wanted to honor you today, to thank you for everything you have built, not just this ranch but this family. You showed us what love looks like, what partnership means, what commitment can create." Clara added, her voice thick with emotion, "You gave us roots and wings, both. You taught us to love this land and also to reach beyond it. Everything good in our lives started with the two of you." One by one, children and grandchildren spoke, sharing memories and gratitude. Xavier watched Catherine's face, saw the tears streaming down her cheeks, and moved to stand beside her. "These are happy tears," she said, laughing through them. "So many happy tears." "The only kind you are allowed," he said, wiping them gently with his thumb as he had done so many times over the years. The photographer captured it all, images that would be treasured for generations. The whole family gathered in front of the house Xavier had built with his own hands. Xavier and Catherine alone, still clearly in love after 5 decades. The grandchildren playing in the yard where their father had played before them. Moments frozen in time, documenting a legacy of love and hard work. That evening, after everyone had eaten their fill and the younger children had been put to bed, Xavier and Catherine slipped away to their favorite spot, a rise overlooking the ranch where they could see the house and barns, the grazing cattle, the whole spread of land they had built their life upon. 50 years, Catherine said wonderingly. "It seems like yesterday and also like forever." "Do you have any regrets?" Xavier asked, though he thought he knew the answer. "Not a single one," she said firmly. "Even the hard parts, the drought years and the sick cattle and the times we wondered if we would make it, those were worth it because we faced them together. You kept your promise, Xavier. My tears ended that day. Everything after has been joy." "You kept your promise too," he said. "You said yes to a life with me, to building something good in this wild place. You gave me more than I ever dreamed possible." They sat as the stars emerged, the same stars they had watched on their first evening together, constant and bright against the vast New Mexico sky. Xavier held his wife close, feeling the solid warmth of her against him, and thought about the young man he had been when he first came to this territory, lonely and determined and dreaming of something more. That young man could never have imagined this, the richness and fullness of the life he had built. The woman beside him who had become his whole world. The children and grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. The land that had been wild and empty was now home to multiple families, a community bound by blood and friendship and shared purpose. "What are you thinking?" Catherine asked softly. "That I am the luckiest man who ever lived," Xavier replied. "That God or fate or whatever force governs the universe blessed me beyond measure the day you stepped off that train. Even though I was crying," she teased gently. "Especially because you were crying," he said seriously. "Because it meant you had the courage to feel deeply, to grieve what you had lost, to be vulnerable. And it gave me the chance to offer you something better, to be the man who ended your tears." Catherine turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes that still had the power to make his heart race. "You are that man," she said. "Today, tomorrow, and always. You are the man who ended my tears and gave me a lifetime of joy." He kissed her then, under the stars that had witnessed their whole love story, and tasted salt from her happy tears and the sweetness of her lips. 50 years of kissing her and it still felt new, still filled him with wonder and gratitude. As they finally made their way back to the house, moving slower than they once had but still sure-footed on the land they knew intimately, Xavier looked at the lights glowing in the windows. His home, their home, full of family and love and the fruits of a lifetime of work and partnership. The years continued their steady march. Xavier and Catherine moved into their 70s, still active but content to let the younger generation carry most of the burden of ranch work. They took joy in their grandchildren, watching them grow and start families of their own. Great-grandchildren began to arrive, tiny miracles that made Xavier feel the weight and wonder of his years. He was 78 and Catherine 72, when Xavier's health began to fail. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for decades. His heart was weakening, the doctor told him gently. He had a year, maybe 2 if he was lucky and careful. Xavier did not tell Catherine at first, not wanting to cast a shadow over their remaining time. But she knew, of course. After more than 5 decades together, they could read each other with a glance. She confronted him one evening as they sat on their porch, watching yet another spectacular sunset. "How long did the doctor give you?" she asked quietly. Xavier could not lie to her. He had never lied to her. "A year. Maybe more, maybe less." She took his hand, her grip still strong despite the arthritis that gnarled her fingers. "Then we will make it the best year of our life together." "They have all been the best years," he said. "Yes," she agreed. "But this one will be special because we will treasure every moment." And they did. They made sure to tell their children and grandchildren they loved them every single day. They rode out to their favorite spots on the ranch, moving slowly but steadily. They sat together in comfortable silence, and they talked for hours, remembering their life together, all the moments that had made them who they were. On a cool April morning, with the wildflowers blooming across the ranch land and the cattle moving peacefully in the distance, Xavier woke beside his wife for the last time. He knew somehow that this was the day, felt it in the laboring of his heart and the heaviness in his chest. "Catherine," he whispered, and she woke immediately, attuned to him even in sleep. "I am here," she said, taking his hand. "I love you," he said, the words he had spoken countless times but never enough. "You made my life everything it should be. Thank you for stepping off that train. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for 56 years of joy and love and partnership." "I love you too," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Always and forever, Xavier Kane. You kept your promise. My tears ended with you. You gave me nothing but happiness." "No more tears," he said softly, reaching up to touch her face one last time. "Only tears of gratitude," she replied. "For the gift of you, for the life we built, for the love that will outlast even this moment." Xavier closed his eyes, feeling her hand in his, hearing her voice speaking love and comfort, and slipped away peacefully. He left the world the way he had lived his final decades, surrounded by love, secure in his legacy, at peace with a life well lived. Catherine held him for a long time, memorizing the face she had loved for 56 years, saying goodbye to the man who had kept his promise, who had ended her tears and given her a lifetime of joy. When she finally called for their children, her voice was steady. She had learned in their years together that grief was the price of great love, and she would pay it gladly. Xavier was buried on a rise overlooking the ranch, the same spot where he and Catherine had spent so many evenings watching the sunset. The whole community came to pay respects to a man who had been a pillar of the territory since its early days. Emmett spoke about his father's integrity and hard work. Clara shared memories of his gentleness and wisdom. Diego, now old himself, talked about friendship and loyalty that transcended employer and employee. And Catherine, standing beside the grave, spoke last. "He promised me on the day we met that my tears would end with him," she said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "He kept that promise for 56 years. He gave me joy and love and a family and a home. He was the best man I have ever known, and I am grateful beyond words that he chose me, that he saw past my tears to the life we could build together. I will miss him every moment of every day, but I will not despair, because he gave me so much that his love will carry me through." Catherine lived another 12 years, dying peacefully in her sleep at 84. In those years, she continued to be the heart of the family, teaching her great-grandchildren, maintaining the garden she loved, sitting on the porch and telling stories about the man she had loved and the life they had built together. She was buried beside Xavier on that same rise, their headstones simple but meaningful. Xavier's read, "He promised her tears would end, he kept his word." And Catherine's, "She said yes, she never regretted it." The ranch continued through the generations, each inheriting not just land and cattle, but the legacy of love and partnership that Xavier and Catherine had modeled. Their story became family legend, told and retold to each new generation, a reminder that the best things in life were built on love and trust and commitment. And sometimes, on clear New Mexico evenings when the sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, family members claimed they could see two figures sitting on that rise overlooking the ranch, holding hands and watching the stars emerge, still together, still in love, their tears ended, and their joy eternal in the harsh, beautiful land they had made home.